All right, so what does this script standardize? What does it help us standardize? Your verbiage. What are you? You're a verbal what? Artist. How do people think? Do they think in pictures or in words? For example, right now, everybody close their eyes for a second. Okay? If you looked out to the ocean, what color does the water look like? What's the sand look like? What do the waves smell like? All right, everybody open their eyes. How many of you guys saw the word OCEAN in your head? People don't think in what? Words, they think in pictures. So what we are trying to do is paint a picture of why I've got a candidate, by painting a vivid picture about their background, why they feel the wound of the client. Why is the client wounded right now? Their best person just what? Either they expand their staff, or they just lost their senior financial analyst, or they just lost their controller. Does that cause discouragement in the company? When the top guys leave, you go, oh, why'd he go? Okay, morale issues. The position's now been open for 6 weeks, so I'm there to heal what? Find the wounds and heal it. I do that by painting a picture about my candidate and about how I can find this kind of person every day and twice on Sunday. That's what we're trying to say in our differentiating statement. Okay? We're going to break that down. All right. So the other thing this allows you to do is focus on how you say it rather than what you're saying, instead of just winging it every time. And guys, I do this myself. You know what I find though? When I get a question that's thrown out there at me that caught me off guard, before I know it, I'm focused on what? The answer rather than what I'm going to say after I answer it. Okay, I obviously have to answer the question, but I want to go right back to what my intention was here, is to knock this guy out with sizzle. Okay? Because even if they say we're not hiring right now, and you do that every single time you talk to that guy, and you have a great candidate, what's he going to say about you after a while when he hangs up the phone? Man, every time I talk to this guy, he is representing just smoking people. Okay, let me give you a true story. I was in the business for 3 or 4 years, and I decided to go back to college. Okay, you probably heard this morning when I told you about Y factors, whatever. I dropped out as an early, young age. And I went back to school, but I convinced my company to let me open a new office in the city where I was going back to college. But I was only working part-time because I had my classes, and then I would generally work in the afternoon from 1 to 6. Okay? So I was hoping, back then I was about a $300,000, $350 biller in the mid-'80s. I was hoping to at least be able to bill $150 to $175 to put myself through college. And actually my ex-wife was going through school at the same time. So here I had 3 kids, and I was putting 2 adults through college with 1 income. Okay? And it wasn't easy, moving to a new city and having to change my marketplace and my focus and whatever. So I was very diligent, worked hard. First year, did pretty well. Out of 100 recruiters, I came in the top 25, working part-time. That wasn't bad. Second year, my niche really started gaining. You know, it was a little harder than me because I was going to school full-time. And I'll never forget this phone call. I had been calling a guy named Steve Gillette for years. He had just transferred or moved from New England area down to the Carolinas when the Carolinas were really growing very, very rapidly, as they still are in the 80s. He was a chief engineer with General Electric, and he went to a company called Siemens Energy and Automation. Those 2 companies now represent about $250 billion in revenues, so they're pretty good-sized companies. And every time I talked to this guy, my first call to him was a recruiting call. He says, Tim, no, I just moved my family. I just went to Siemens. I was at GE for 15 years, but let's keep in touch because I may have some openings down the road. But it just kind of blew me off, right? Didn't even think about it. So I just continued to put it, you know, we had a fairly decent click in that first call. So I just continued to call the guy. He kept saying no, saying no. About 4 months later, he finally says, okay, you've proven a couple things to me. Number 1 is you're persistent. Number 2, I love the way you sell. I said after my first phone call with you, took out my Rolodex in my car and said, guy knows how to sell, knows how to recruit, sells the sizzle. He literally wrote that about me. And he never told me this for a long time. Okay? So finally, I called in again with another top candidate. I was one of maybe 5 or 6 recruiters in my industry that specialized in that niche. And he finally says, okay, I'm going to give you a shot. Finally has an opening. Go through the process. Now this is where the candidate's in Iowa and the client's in North Carolina. No resume. I said, Tim, I like the sound of his background. Let's get him on a plane and fly him in here. I said, well, wait a second. You're not going to ask for a resume first? He goes, no. Is he good like you said? I said, yeah. So now who did that put the burden on? You know, fly him in, put him in a hotel, meals, that was a $1,000 yes on the send out, right? Goes in there and we place the guy like clockwork. Bingo. Turn around, gives me 8 or 9 openings. Then he goes to later in the year, this is about 3/4 in the year, I'm in the top 10 in the recruiters out of 100, working part-time. All of a sudden I get a call and start getting faxes. This is back when faxes started coming in. And I started getting calls from department heads, chief engineers all over the country with Siemens. I was like, I finally said, well, you're faxing me a resume in? Please give me a call as soon as possible. I finally called up Steve and said, what happened? He said, we were just at a national conference with a company in Atlanta, and one of the topics came up as, you know, the problems of recruitment. And I brought your name up and gave everybody your phone number because I said, look, this guy really knows his niche, really knows his stuff. And I'll never forget that stretch. It was right towards the end of the year. It's probably the best run that I had that I can remember. Out of nowhere, I got all these job orders, working part-time, okay? I had like 16 send-outs. I built $135,000 in about 4 or 5 weeks and ended up being #1 in the company and a record holder, okay? Broke another record, working part-time. And the people said, well, Tim, what was the secret to your success? I said, you know, bottom line was I kept saying the same thing with quality people time over time over time, and finally one of them hit big time. So what did we determine before? Only a handful of companies understand what? That all successful business operations come down to what? 3 basic principles. People, product, profit. Without top people, I can't do much with the other 2. And all of you told me that if I looked at all your invoices over the last 2 years, there's probably less than how many companies? Okay? Probably 10 companies. So through this process, we're not going to, you know, it used to be quantity leads to quality. You guys are all veterans now, okay? And we're going to pop into now on how to build that daily planner and get on that phone call. So do you get it on the script? Bottom line, it allows you to be more passionate, excited, confident, enthusiastic. In other words, as an actor, I don't want to have to be worried about what I'm saying, but focused in on. And when you get back and after you get your basic intro down and closing question, you know, Joe, if not yourself, who do you know when they do hire, look for exceptional people such as this? Then it's just a matter of interchanging the sizzle points based upon the candidate, right? But it makes you sound like what Steve Gillette's point was. He said, I finally, about 2 years after, I built these guys for over $1 million in about a 5-year stretch. And I said, why did you end up doing that one day when you introduced me to all those people at the convention? He said, buddy, after I heard from you 3 or 4 times, I wrote down, I want him recruiting for me and certainly not against me, because the guy sounds excited and confident. He had great candidates every single time. So remember, no matter what happens on that call that doesn't sound like it went anywhere, the bottom line is you make that impact. Make them think that, man, in other words, I try to say, hey, I literally don't say this, but when it comes to recruiting, I'm the badass recruiter of Miami, okay? I'm the go-to guy in D.C. And you want to carry that tone no matter what it feels like right now. Because you're soon going to see people, we don't have a job order problem. We have a job order uncovering problem. That's why I had you say it 3 times, okay? Uncovering. So that's what we're going to get into here. All right, you ready? Let's go over to 24. This is just briefly, we went over this. There's 4 parts of the script. You introduce yourself, where you set yourself apart. Statement to differentiate yourself. Get into the 4 to 5 sizzle points about your candidate, okay? And then an open-ended closing question. What happens if I say, Sean, do you have any openings right now? No, not really. We never ask a yes, no, do it. So one of my favorite is, I want to induce conversation. So my closing question I came up with a long time ago was, Sean, who do you know that when they do hire, look for exceptional people such as my candidate? Well, what's the guy going to say? No, I hire idiots? Okay? No, I want him to say, well, I do. I said, well, great. Since you don't necessarily have an opening right now, when's the next time you anticipate having a need? If not now, when? And if when, what? Those are the 2 questions you wanted to get down on every question here, guys. If not now, when? And if when, what? And that's what Neil is talking about. I've got a pre-candidate profile and a pre-client profile where there's a list of questions in there that we can ask value-based questions on when you next anticipate having a difficult position to fill. What is the skill set you typically look for in that background? What sources do you normally go about using? When was the last time you paid a fee for a top flight person? Is this something that's in your budget? What is your attitude towards using agencies? What's your company's overall attitude using agencies? Okay? So we have